Wall Street insiders like Paul Tudor Jones, David Einhorn, and even Jeff Bezos are coming out and warning the public that we are in a huge stock market bubble. In fact, Paul Tudor Jones, who was made famous by shorting the stock market just before the 1987 Black Monday crash, just came out on CNBC and said this reminds him a lot of 1999.
Feels exactly like 1999. I don't know whether we'll actually replay it exactly, but I think all the ingredients are in place.
So the big question becomes, is it 1999 where the stock market goes up by 50%, or is it 2000 when the stock market crashes by 50%? I'm going to do my best to answer those questions for you in 3 simple, fast steps. Step number 1, let's go over why on earth is this so important. Let's look at a chart, or go back to that chart, of the S&P 500, and this is in nominal terms. In other words, it is not adjusted for inflation. We go to, call it 2013, all the way back to 1998, 1999. On the left, we go from 800 up to 1500. So I want to highlight not just this move that we already talked about, but I want to highlight the fact that it got up to 1500 in the year 2000. Okay? And I also want to point out that it did not exceed that level for roughly 13 years. So I want to ask a question to every single one of you watching this video right now. If I told you the stock market would be at the exact same level in 13 years as it is today, and again, remember, we're not adjusting for inflation, would you buy the S&P 500 index fund that Dave Ramsey tells you to buy with 10%, or whatever it is, of every single paycheck? So the main point for this step and why it's so important to understand, not just if we're in 1999 or in 2000, or maybe more importantly, if this is a bubble, is that everything you hear in the mainstream media, everything you hear from probably your financial planner is buy and hold, buy the dip, dollar cost average. But the problem with that is evident when you look at this chart. If you would have bought and hold right here, there is no way you would have been able to retire, let's say, in 10 years, or at least meet your overall portfolio objectives. And let's assume you bought the dip, or dollar cost average. Then you would have bought here, 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 and here. And by the time you got to here, you'd probably be so emotionally distraught that you'd sell everything at a massive loss, and you'd swear off the stock market for the rest of your life. And by the way, even if you are able to implement these, let's say, strategies, how many of you would be willing to wait, let's say 10 years, from call it right here or in here to right here, until your portfolio got back to positive? How many people, go ahead and raise your hand, would be willing to wait for 10 years? And keep in mind, this is just in nominal terms. If we adjust for inflation, it would be much, much worse. And if you bought and hold right around here, you would not have to wait 13 years to get back to even in terms of your purchasing power. You'd probably have to wait 14, 15, 16, maybe even 17 years, all depending on the rate of inflation from here to right here. And that's why it is so important, and I would say it's even critical, to know whether we are in 1998, 1999, or 2000. And this is what we're going to try to figure out throughout the rest of this video. Step number 2. Now, I know a lot of you right about now are saying, George, this is absolutely crazy. There is no way that 2025 has any resemblance whatsoever to 1998, 1999, 2000, the dot-com bubble, or the dot-com bust. I don't care what Paul Tudor Jones is saying. I don't care what Jeff Bezos is saying. I don't care what David Einhorn is saying. Why? Because you can't compare something like pets.com to something like NVIDIA or maybe OpenAI. And this is a great argument. But this highlights a mistake that investors make over and over and over and over again. They always assume that if they would have been investing in 1999, that they would have made much, much different decisions, because there was no credible argument whatsoever for Pets.com. I mean, they weren't even making revenue, for heaven's sakes. So the only reason people were investing in these .com stocks back then is they were just completely out of their mind. It was just a mania. It was just hysteria. It was just irrational exuberance, as Alan Greenspan said. And today, no, we don't have any of that, George, because every single bull argument for, let's say, the AI stocks is very, very credible. So let's go ahead and put that to the test. What I did is I went to ChatGPT and I said, give me the bull argument back in 1998 or 1999 for Pets.com. And let's see if it's actually a credible argument. Check this out. First thing, the bulls said back in 1998, 99, Pets.com, look, it's got a first mover advantage. And I highlighted right here, you have to form these customer habits early. They thought once customers used it, switching costs or convenience would lock them in. So right now, why does OpenAI basically give away their product that they have to pay for to 95% of the people that use it? Maybe there's 5% that actually pay a premium like I do, but 95% of the people get it for free. Why are they doing this? What's their argument? This is it. They're trying to lock in customer behavior. So once they get attached to AI, then they're going to demand it as far as the business products as well. So you take it from a B2C type product to a B2B type product, and that's where the money is made. Very, very similar argument. Let's keep going. Massive market opportunity. Online penetration upside. Sound familiar? And by the way, I want to point out that a lot of the bullish arguments for Pets.com were correct. They were absolutely spot on. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the price of Pets.com reflected the actual value. And even if something does play out in 10 years, 15 years, it doesn't mean that the stock currently is priced appropriately for what will happen over the next 2 years or the next 3 years. Very, very important point. So we go back to massive market opportunity. We all know the internet was this, and we all know that AI is this today. Absolutely true. The pet products market was large and growing. E-commerce was assumed to be the future of retail. Correct. Bulls assumed that over time, more customers would shift purchasing of mundane goods, pet food, litter, toys online. Correct. So even if margins were low initially, the volume would make up for it. Or today, even if OpenAI is hemorrhaging money on every single customer, they're basically selling $1 for 5 cents. Over time, the volume is going to make up for it because, again, they're going to integrate AI into people's lives, and therefore they're going to be able to charge businesses for this service. And I'm not saying that that's not going to happen. My base case is it absolutely will, and it'll likely happen in 5 years, 10 years, to an extreme. And that's a whole other topic for a whole separate video. But that doesn't mean that the price of where these stocks or the valuations for these companies right now make sense based on what's going to happen over the next 2 or 3 years, just like the price for Pets.com didn't match up with the short-term reality. So let's go back to number 3, network scale of economies and fulfillment, logistics, marketing. The highlight here, scale would drive down unit costs of shipping and inventory handling. It's the exact same thing we're hearing today, where the bulls are arguing that the cost to deliver AI is going to go down further and further and further and further and further because the GPUs, the chips or whatever, are going to become more and more efficient.
And here's one I think you guys are really going to find interesting, if not shocking. Number 4, strategic partnerships. We're hearing that a lot lately in the news, where OpenAI is investing in Oracle, Oracle is investing in NVIDIA, NVIDIA is investing in CoreWeave, CoreWeave is investing in Oracle. I'm not sure if those are the companies that are actually investing in one another, but you get my point. And I think it's just incredible that one of the first investors and one of the major investors in Pets.com was Amazon. So if you believe that only fools would have invested in Pets.com back in 1998 or 1999, here you go. Jeff Bezos, I wouldn't really call him a fool. And by the way, Jeff Bezos is one of the guys that today is saying that AI is in a bubble. If anyone should know, it's the guy that was the major shareholder of Pets.com. Number 5, disruption of retail middlemen. So the thesis here is cut out the retail markup, deliver direct to the customer, let them capture the savings, and then you're going to get all the business. Eventually, this is what played out. Number 6, get scale first, monetize later. And do we really need to go over that? That's exactly what you're hearing right now from Sam Altman, OpenAI, the guys that are just incinerating billions of dollars every single year. Don't worry about it. We're losing money, but we're going to monetize later. Maybe, maybe not. Number 7 was brand and viral marketing. This is a moat for Pets.com. Number 8, assumed future improvements in infrastructure and logistics. And this is another thing that we hear right now in the AI space. Number 9, lock in via data, customer lifetime value, and repeat purchases. This is one of the major arguments that I hear for Microsoft incorporating AI. The AI is going to be this boon for them, so they're going to be willing to spend 30, 40, 50 billion dollars a year on all this CapEx, because on the back end, once they acquire a customer into their, let's say, ecosystem, then they can upsell them all these other products. So my point is, back then, you had very convincing, credible, and valid arguments for all of these .com stocks that everyone knows today, hindsight being 2020, that it was a bubble. And today we have just as credible and valid and convincing arguments for the AI stocks. But just because we have all of these incredibly logical arguments that make sense, and we all know that AI is the future, it doesn't mean this time it's different. So then we go back to the important question that we asked at the beginning. Is this 1998, 1999, or the dreaded 2000? And that's the question I'm going to try to answer right now.
Step number 3. So what year is it? Is it a year where we could have a 50% up move and a blow off top? Or is it a year where we could have a 50% down move, a crash that wipes out people's 401k and, unfortunately, a lot of people's plans for retirement? Well, before we get into my answer, I want to go over a clip from Paul Tudor Jones, that same interview, where he talked about how this time the blow off top could be even more extreme than we saw in 1999, meaning we could go up, let's just say in 2025 or maybe into 2026, even more than 50%. Who knows, maybe 100%, 200% higher. Editor, go ahead and cut to the clip.
At 1999, we were looking at a rate hike in November. Now we're looking at a rate cut. We were looking at 4 more rate hikes before we actually topped in 2000. Now we're looking at 3 or 4 rate cuts, probably at least. So you have monetary policy that's going to take us to real rates of 0 or less, probably, depending upon the next Fed chair. And then the big difference is, obviously, fiscal policy. We had a budget surplus in 99, 2000. Now we've got a 6% budget deficit. So that combination, that fiscal monetary combination, is a brew that we haven't seen since, I guess, the post-war period.
So Paul Tudor Jones accurately points out that in the late 1990s, we had the Fed, in this case Greenspan, was actually increasing interest rates. And, oh, by the way, as far as the fiscal side of the equation, I know this is mind-blowing in today's day and age, but the government was actually running a surplus. That's right. You can fact check me on that one. It is true. The government had a budget surplus. So it's the opposite of propping up the economy with fiscal deficit spending, if you want to look at it through the view or through the lens of a Keynesian economist. So that's his argument for why this time, if we are in 1999, we could go up by a heck of a lot more than 50% before we get to the inevitable. Now, I totally understand what he's saying, but I disagree slightly with the monetary argument. Why is that? Because back in the 1990s or the late 1990s, he's arguing that because the Fed was increasing rates, this was somehow a headwind for the economy. And this view is that interest rates control the economy. And I don't think they do. I don't think there's any evidence for that. I think it's more so that interest rates reflect the economy. So if interest rates were going up in the late 1990s, it wasn't necessarily a headwind for the economy. It was more so a reflection that the economy was doing well. And if interest rates are going down today, it isn't necessarily supporting the economy or acting as quote unquote stimulus. It's a reflection that the economy isn't doing that well. And that brings me to this chart right here. We go from today's date all the way back to 1996. On the left, we go from 2.5% up to 15%. This is the unemployment rate. So for me, it's all about the labor market. The labor market trumps, no pun intended, the actual monetary and fiscal component of what Paul Tudor Jones is talking about. And I think this is also the key to knowing if we're in 1998, 1999, or maybe 2000. So we go back to 1996, and this blue line represents the unemployment rate. I've highlighted this period with this red arrow because I want you to notice the unemployment rate was going down. In fact, if we look at a chart of the non-farm payrolls back then, they were not only positive, they were extremely strong. Now, let's juxtapose that to where we are today. The unemployment rate, although it's flattened out a little bit, from its low and called 2022 or 2023, we've gone up. And you guys know from watching my videos that the labor market is deteriorating rapidly, where our most recent non-farm payrolls are not only not strong, they're not just weak, they're actually negative. And when you combine that with all these downward revisions that we've seen from the BLS, on top of the JOLTS numbers getting weaker, on top of the negative ADP private payrolls, you see that the labor market is much, much, much different today than it was in 1998 or 1999. In fact, it's the complete opposite. So why does this matter so much? Well, it takes us right back to something that we talk about on this channel all the time. And of course, my good buddy Mike Green was the first person to really point this out. It's the difference in passive investing. Today, such a huge percentage of the overall market is the brain dead robot or the brain dead zombie. I can't remember what Mike calls it. He says it's the most simple algorithm in human history, and that is $1 in and you buy, $1 out and you sell. It's completely non-discretionary. There is no decision-making process. It's simply all about inflows or outflows. So if there are net inflows into passive, that means that there's going to be, let's just say 8 or 9 cents for every dollar going into the S&P, let's say a passive index fund. Every dollar that goes into that passive index fund, 8 or 9 cents is going to go to NVIDIA. And it's going to disproportionately go to the Mag 7 because that S&P index is a weighted index. The problem you have is that right now the concentration is so extreme at the top with the Mag 7 and basically a representation of the AI bubble that if we go from net inflows to net outflows, instead of that 8 cents going to NVIDIA and therefore disproportionately benefiting NVIDIA, now if that dollar comes out, the 8 or 9 cents is going to be taken away from NVIDIA, and I'm just using them as a proxy for the Mag 7, and that's going to have a disproportionate negative impact on those companies that are so wrapped up in this AI circular economy. So here's the main takeaway. If the labor market flattens out or starts to maybe improve, I definitely think it's 1998 or 1999. But if the unemployment rate starts to go higher and higher and higher, and we see further deterioration in the jobs market, we see further negative non-farm payrolls, the household survey looks terrible, ADP numbers continue to stay negative, the JOLTS numbers continue to show that there's far more workers who are unemployed than jobs available, this tilts the odds that we're going to go from a net inflow into passive into a net outflow. And if we go into a net outflow, it doesn't matter how good the story is around the AI stocks, they're going to go down, and they're going to go down hard. So then the question becomes, well, what do I do, George? How do I set up my portfolio? What strategies do I use to not only protect my wealth, but hopefully grow my wealth in this out of control world of bears, bulls, bubbles, out of control central banks, and big governments? The good news is I have a private investment community with my good friends Lynn Alden and Chris McIntosh, where we help investors just like you navigate these dangerous times. If you want more information on that, we'll put a link in the description below.